How to create pro-approved doors in Unreal Engine 5. Getting all players in the game to see the same thing when a door is opened or closed in an Unreal Engine 5 project is quite the process. I always hold myself to a high standard, and you should too when making the game of your dreams. So let's get right into part 4 of how I was able to get the result you're seeing right now. And then we'll go down to our interact function, and this is where we get to the meat of the changes here. So get rid of that line, I commented that out and forgot to delete it. So first we're going to check to validate our actor that's passed in, because we don't want to do anything, obviously, if that isn't valid. And then we're going to check if our interaction keys contain the key that were passed. And then we're going to check if the door is locked and return out if it is, because then we won't need to open or close the door. And then once we're past the checks, we have to check to see if we want to open the door, and otherwise we'll hit the else condition where we close the door. And assuming that we are opening the door, which we'll see if the current door angle is 0 or if the door is currently closing using that flag that we're setting, we're first going to call the open door function, because remember, this is on the server and we need to make sure that we start opening the door on our local server. And then once we start that, we can call the multicast version and make sure that all the other clients are also opening their doors. So then we do the exact opposite in the else branch, where we close the door and then call the multicast close door as well. So just the exact opposite there. And then for interact local, we first check to make sure our actor is valid, and then we check to make sure that we aren't in standalone or the server. And what this is going to do is make sure we don't actually call our closed door twice, because when we call the server function and we're in standalone, that is going to be called automatically and instantly. And the same thing if we're playing as a player-controlled server in an online section that isn't a dedicated server format. So we just want to make sure that things aren't called twice, and that's what that line is going to do. And then again, we're checking for the interaction keys, and then we'll scroll down a little bit, and we'll see on this local version, if the door is locked, then we want to play our lock sound. And as you can see, we have a whole bunch of calls to make sure that our audio component is set up correctly. But ultimately, all these lines are doing is playing that audio. So nothing too interesting there. And then we can move on to the next check, where again, we're trying to figure out if we're opening or closing the door. And in the first conditional, we are opening the door. And then we want to call close door in the else of that conditional. And then next we have the server lock door. And all we need to do here is flip the Boolean locally on the server and then call the net multicast lock door function. So very straightforward. And then we'll scroll down a bit and we have the unlock door, which is the exact same thing, but for unlock. And then begin play, where we're going to add those interaction keys for door, and then the same thing for those other arrays. So the interaction keys need key press and do interactions once. And then we're setting the interaction text to be our open text by default, because the door is going to start off closed. And then from there, we can call begin play, because then it's going to call the version of that we have set up on the interactable actor. So it'll set all those keys and do all that good stuff that we need to be done here and we won't have to type it all out again, which is always good. And then we have our multicast for open and close, and these are very similar. Within each one, the first thing we need to do is double check that we haven't already ordered our open door command. And in the open case, we need to make sure the door isn't already opening and that the primary tick actor has tick enabled, because that's telling us that we've already ordered our open door. And then we also need to make sure that this isn't the dedicated server mode and that this does not have authority, because in both of those cases, we've already opened the door and we want to make sure we're not going to inadvertently call it again, because we want to do those kinds of checks here as opposed to in the actual open door function, because we want to separate out that functionality where open door is literally just opening the door with no checks and anything else that we need to do. And then obviously close door is the same check but inverted and the same function as well. And then we go down to the net multicast for lock and unlock. And same thing there, we're just checking to make sure we're not the server in a dedicated server format. And if that is not the case, just call the lock and unlock functions. And we should be all set for standalone client server with us playing as a dedicated server and as just a simple listen server. So we'll be all set in all those configurations with all these checks and all that good stuff we've implemented here. And now we'll go over our open door function. So first we're updating the goal angle to be our open angle. And we'll go over setting this in blueprints later. And then first, we're going to check to make sure that there isn't a sound already playing. And if there is, we're going to stop that sound. And then we need to play our open sound. And same thing there, we get our random pitch, we set the sound, we set the volume multiplier and the pitch multiplier, and then we play. And again, we call that get play start time to make sure we're calling this to finish right when the door finishes open. So it'll sound nice and it'll make sense when you see the door opening and closing. And then next, we're going to set the interaction text to be the close text, because once the door has been opened, the next action you want to take is to close the door, because either it'll be in the middle of opening or it'll be fully open, and in both of those cases you'll want to close it next. And then we need to update our flag indicating that the door is closing to false because it is now opening. And then we need to make sure that tick is enabled. And if it isn't, we want to set our tick to be enabled to make sure that our update door rotation function will run because we called it in tick earlier. And then close door, you'll see, is pretty much the same as open, other than the goal angle obviously becomes 0. The door sound is now the close sound, and we're setting the interaction text to text open, and we're setting that boolean to true because now the door is closing. So very straightforward, just kind of the exact opposite of open. And then we have our lock and unlock. With each of these, all we're doing is just flipping the boolean. Locked will be true and unlocked will be false. And next up, we have our update door rotation function. And the first thing we need to do is calculate a couple of things. So the degrees per second that the door will move, and then the delta angle So the degrees per second times delta time. So basically giving us the delta angle, this delta time update. And then we want to check if the door is closing. We want to multiply that delta angle by -1 because obviously it's going in the negative direction if it's closing. And then we want to have the current angle. We are going to find that by adding delta angle to the current angle, and we are clamping that value at 0 in the open angle. So that this way, the value can't go past either of those because we don't want it to be below 0 or above the open angle. And then moving on, if we have reached our goal angle, then we want to disable tick because we don't need to update anymore. And then last but not least, we need to set our relative rotation to be the new current door angle. And we want true there because that's telling us that we're going to sweep. So if there's something blocking the door's path, it's going to kind of knock that out of the way. And you'll see that when we go to test. And then we have this get play start time, where first we're going to figure out the time to our goal. Then we're going to calculate the play start time. And last but not least, we're going to check if that play start time is less than 0. We're just going to set it to 0. And then we'll return the play start time. Because at some point, if the play start time is less than 0, there's nothing that this function can do to help us. So we just need to set that back to 0. And then we are all set with the door.cpp and all of our C++ changes. So just build the project and launch the editor. And now we're finally done with all those C++ changes, and we can make the changes to audio that we're going to need to make. So we'll enter our audio library, and first we'll go to sound classes, and we're going to duplicate our footsteps class because we need to make a new one. Well, I guess we can just make a new one, that's fine. So audio classes, sound class, SCL underscore misc effects. And this is going to encompass things like our door and a whole bunch of stuff. So we can close out of the class, and we want to go into all audio, and we can bring up the content drawer and drop that in because we want it to be a child of the all audio. And then we can compile and save all of that. And we're all set with our new sound class. And we can close out of there. And then we'll go back into the content drawer. And we're just going to make some new attenuations. So just duplicate this. And instead of footsteps, we'll call it SA misc sound effects. And then that's fine there. And then we'll keep adding our stuff here. So we'll go back into the audio library and concurrencies, and we'll duplicate it and make one called misc effects because we want to make sure this is completely separate from the footsteps. And then next up, we are going to go into sound cues, and we're going to make a new folder called doors. And we'll click into there, and we're going to create some sound cues, and we'll just duplicate one of the footstep ones, and we'll drag that into our doors. So move that in, and we'll rename it to SC underscore door open. And then we can duplicate that, but first we'll go in here and actually set it. So we can delete all those. And now we can go to the film cow designed. Well, I guess it's in recorded. And just search for door open. And then we have our door open. And I turn on sound so I can make sure these sound fine. And I will click and shift click. So we'll get all 12 of them. And then we're just going to hook all these up to this random node. So I'm going to skip ahead until I'm done with that. I think you guys can figure that part out. As fun as that would be, we'll shave a few seconds off, and we want to update this to the sound class for miss effects and the attenuation for miss effects as well. And then we're all set there. And now we can close this down, and we need to duplicate this a couple of times. So we'll go back to its location. So in the doors sound cue, and we're going to duplicate this, and we want door close, and then door locked. And for now, yep, we are going to duplicate it. So door locked. And then we will open up door close, and we are going to drop in the film cow results. So we'll do close first. Just delete all these. And I'm pretty sure there are 12 door close sounds as well. So that's good. Back to the film cow. And door close. And click, and then shift click all the way to 17. And drop them in, and we'll hook all these up just like the last one, and I'll skip ahead again. And now we're all hooked up, and because we duplicated it, we don't need to mess with anything else. And now we'll move on to the locked one. And if you remember, we don't have any film cow sounds for this, so we'll plug in our 3 that we got from Freesound, and we're going to get rid of these nodes by just right-clicking on them and delete input. So we'll do that for all these. And the reason I'm showing you guys this is because this is at least different than me just hooking them all up. So keep deleting. And now we'll plug these 3 in. And we should be all set with all the audio work that we need to do. So save that off, and then we're good to go. And that seems like a good place to call it a day for today. If you like what I'm doing here with these videos and want me to keep making them, please leave a like and a comment because it really helps me out in the YouTube algorithm. I'll be back with part 5 tomorrow at some point, so definitely subscribe to the channel if you want to keep up with the series and all the other helpful tutorials I'll be putting out on the channel. So with all that being said, thank you so much for watching, as always, and I'll catch you in the next one. Later.